This episode is brought to you by Progressive, a leader in boat insurance. Welcome aboard to Carefree Boating. Here, we don't worry about the what-ifs, because we explore with Progressive Boat Insurance for as little as $100 per year for a basic liability policy. Progressive also offers a variety of other coverages and can help you cover repair costs when you need it. And with discounts like multi-policy, safety courses, responsible driver, and more, your mind can really float free. Cruise on over to Progressive.com to get a quote today and see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Rate and discounts not available in all states or situations.
Honey Bunches of Oats es la forma perfecta de empezar el día con tu familia. Con hojuelas crujientes y miel de verdad que a los niños les encanta. Además, deliciosos trozos de granola, nueces y fruta que todos van a disfrutar. Honey Bunches of Oats es para todos. Toca el banner para saber más.
Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is Audrey Knox. She's been working in Hollywood for 14 years and is committed to pulling back the curtain on the craft and business of screenwriting for newbies and working screenwriters alike. She offers a number of courses which you can find on her website. I'll put a link on the show notes, as well as one-to-ones for consultation, portfolio review, and mentorship. But anyone who follows Audrey on LinkedIn will know that commitment to pulling back the curtain is very true, as she offers lots of free advice via her newsletter. And what we are going to discuss, the 35-page free booklet, How to Query Literary Managers for Your Screenplay, the Query Email Guidebook for Screenwriters by Audrey Knox, brackets, a literary manager. Welcome to the show, Audrey.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, when I wrote this guidebook, I was working as a literary manager at a company called Cartel Entertainment. That company has since, as of December of last year, rebranded. They're now called Evoke Entertainment.
Okay.
So if you ever see the new management company on the scene, Evoke Entertainment, it's formerly known as Cartel. They're the same company. But also, as of December of last year, I no longer work as a manager. I have pivoted to writing full-time. I also do consulting and am continuing my teaching and have started an online class and community for screenwriters. So we're all in the process right now of guiding writers through the process from beginning to end, idea to finishing that first draft of a feature screenplay in 8 weeks. So I still talk to everyone I know from my literary management days, and we can get into all of this if you find that interesting or helpful to your listeners. But basically, I've got 10 years of management experience behind me, and I'm continuing to talk about it. But as of January of this year, that's no longer my full-time day job.
Fantastic. That's a very exciting time that I meet you at then. And we will also be discussing 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Does that sound like what you've signed up for?
It does. This is all lining up with our previous email conversation. So I'm feeling really good about it.
Excellent. Now, the title and the subheading of your guidebook seem pretty obvious as to what it's about. But can you give a brief synopsis to what you would say the book is? The guide that you've written?
Over the years, I started working at Cartel in 2016. I was promoted up to junior manager in 2018 and then full-time manager in 2020. And during all of that time, I'd have conversations with friends who were writers, or I would speak at panels or roundtables or events. And in all of the situations in which I was interacting with writers outside of the industry who had questions for me, they all were consistently asking the same questions. How do I get a manager? What does the manager look for in a portfolio? What does a manager look for in a query email? How do I get in front of literary managers? I've won a couple competitions. Now what do I do? And I was answering these questions consistently in all of these different situations, but figured it would also be helpful to compile everything into one document that I could scale outside of me showing up to one-on-one events and panels and roundtables and talking to all of these writers individually or in small groups. So I basically took the frequently asked questions that writers always had for me and wrote down the answers that I was always giving. And then on top of that, as a manager, I received hundreds, maybe thousands, I'm not sure, of query emails. So I'm getting dozens every week, a few every day. I responded to very few of them, but I did respond to some of them. I read very few of those scripts, but I did read some. And I even met with some writers that I met via query email, and I only ever signed one of them. That writer did go on to launch a career in feature writing. We got her first staffing job in television, and she's continuing to work to this day. So it is possible. Now, if you do the math on the odds of that happening from how many thousands of emails I'm getting to the one person who actually broke through, it's very slim odds. But I'm certainly not the only manager at Cartel that signed someone off of a query email that went on to have a thriving career. And I'm by no means the only manager in the industry who has done this. And one thing I also noticed was the difference between an email that I was willing and excited to respond to and an email coming in from someone who didn't know what they were doing was pretty vast. And there's a clear set of things that you can and should include in a query email that will make managers really receptive to reading your script. Now, if your log line isn't totally working 100%, or you don't have the exact level of experience or background that they're looking for, and the subject matter of the query doesn't pique their interest, it could just be a personality fit. It could just be that their slate is too full. There's all sorts of reasons why your query email could be working and then you don't get a response. But 90% of writers aren't even at that level. I mean, and I've gotten query emails all across different ranges, from writers who have sent over just really long ramblings of their full bio, a synopsis of their movie, things that overwhelmed me and maybe could have been interesting, but because I had to parse through all of it, I just didn't want to take the time. And I've received query emails that are just, the entire content of the email is, "Hello, I need an agent. Can you help me?" And no, not if you're going to send a query email like that. You have to at least do some Googling and find the advice that's out there. But I wanted to make sure that I was at least putting advice out there so that if people did do some Googling, they had the resources available to them. So I wanted to remove any knowledge excuses in terms of, well, I don't know what to do. At least now, if I'm putting all of this out there consistently, people know what to do. And then whether they do it or not is up to them.
Yeah. And I'm living testimony to your advice in some sense. Not that it got me a manager or an agent, but it certainly got me reads from producers following the same format. I mean, I did a bunch of, I think I did 40 sort of targeted emails and got 4 reads. Now, that's not a bad return as far as I understand the odds. I mean, 2 of them were just a rejection, but then that opened up a dialogue. So you kind of go, that's better than where I started from.
Exactly. Yeah. And for cold outreach, sending these emails to people that you don't know, 4 out of 40. So what is math? A 10% return rate is not bad, actually. Yeah.
So hats off to your. This is me giving a rounded endorsement to the advice of the, because I can know I've never used it before. I'd had lots of sort of dead silence, and I took your advice on how to lay it out, what to emphasize, and how to present it, and it seemed to work. So I'm continuing to do so. So for the listener, and you cover this in the guidebook, could you just sort of briefly say what the difference is between a literary manager and an agent? Because I think there's definitely overlap between the two roles, but they are distinctly different, aren't they?
There is a lot of overlap. I think there's more similarities than differences these days. Over the past 2-3 years, there's been a really big shift in terms of a lot of agents are quitting or getting fired or laid off from their agency jobs and are becoming literary managers. Mm-hmm. So I will get into the differences, but the macro advice I have here is there isn't really a functional difference. It just comes down to whether you click with that person professionally as a potential business advisor and collaborator, and also if the company specializes in the types of jobs and opportunities that you look for. So don't get too caught up in whether someone is an agent or a manager, because these days, I think there's more similarities than differences. But there are differences. So officially, agents in the state of California need to be licensed to be a person who represents talent. They're legally allowed to procure work for their clients and negotiate deals. Managers are not legally allowed to do either of those things. In practice, though, they do. So I don't really know what the distinction is. Managers are allowed to be producers on whether it's their client material or other movies and TV shows and projects. Agents are not allowed to produce. A couple of years ago, many of the agencies developed their own studios. This led to a huge dispute with the Writers Guild that resulted in writers firing all of their agents en masse. That got resolved. It resulted in many of these agencies spinning those studios off. So they're completely different companies now. And the writers have now gone back to their agents. But at the end of the day, managers can produce, agents cannot. There's also some general stereotype differences or vibes-based differences between the two types of reps. So the perception across the industry is that an agent has a bigger roster, so they'll represent 30, 40, 50 writers, and their companies are bigger. So they're giving you less one-on-one attention, but they're sending you out to more places. They have more reach. They're really hustling and grinding in terms of getting you out there, getting your work to executives, and trying to put you up for as many opportunities as possible. There's also a general stereotype around agents being more focused on business and earning money and doing whatever it takes to get you the most money-making opportunities that will get everyone richer faster. Both agents and managers will take 10% of your income, so you don't pay them up front, but you do have to pay them 10% of what you make when they start getting you actual work. And so agents are focused on getting these jobs as quickly as possible. Managers, on the other hand, have a reputation for being more individually focused on the client. So they would have, 15, 20, a dozen clients, a smaller roster so that they can give more individual attention to that person. So most likely you'll sign with a manager before you sign with an agent because they're going to take a more active interest in developing you as a person. And this, yes, does mean they'll package up your script, find producers for it, put you up for jobs, but also generally the manager is the person that you're calling for moral support and emotional support and asking them what is the best path for you to take in your career next. And they're known for and assumed to be more interested in your long-term longevity, the overall arc and trajectory of your career. Whether certain jobs that you take or decisions that you make in terms of what you're doing next aligns with your long-term goals. And a manager is probably going to be the rep that you bring a draft of your script to, is someone who will be more willing and able to give you helpful, valuable notes. But like I said, at the end of the day, there are managers that act very agenty, meaning they just have that personality of being more interested in rolling calls and putting you up for jobs and are less interested in reading multiple drafts of your script. And there are agents that are very managery, meaning they're more likely to sit down and talk to you about your feelings or have a smaller slate or be more focused on your overall career trajectory than immediate money-making opportunities. So it really is just going to come down to the person.
Brilliant. No, that's a really good summary of the distinction. So let's imagine then one of our listeners gets successful and they are brought on board by a literary manager. What do you, having been in that role, and obviously you're a screenwriter yourself as well, what do you think makes a good screenwriter to a literary manager? What does, so rather than what does the literary manager do, what is a screenwriter doing to be a good screenwriter to a manager? to your mind?
So to answer this question, I'm going to assume that the writer already has a solid portfolio of 2 to 5 screenplays that the manager is already excited about and is ready to construct a plan around taking these out to the town. So once the manager has material of yours that they're excited about and they are doing their job of trying to find whether it's the right producers to develop it or use it as a sample to get you hired, what can a screenwriter do to continue to be a good client and keep that enthusiasm up? Because a manager is going to be super excited about a client that they first sign.
Yeah.
And then that enthusiasm, like any new relationship or new thing, new change that happens in life, it inevitably fades. So you can keep it up by generating new material. So you want to make sure that as a writer, you are continuing to write. I know this sounds very obvious, but too many writers actually skip this step. And so once your manager is sending stuff out, it's never beneficial to your career to bother that manager about sending it out to more places. It can be very annoying to a rep if the client is calling them saying, hey, I'm not getting enough meetings. Can you send my script to more executives? If you're not getting enough meetings, one of two things are happening. Either your manager is sending this script out to as many people as they possibly can, and people just don't like it enough to want to transition that into a meeting, or your manager is not sending this script out because they just aren't that enthusiastic about it. You know, maybe they sent it to 5 or 6 people and they got rejections. And then they started thinking, oh, well, I guess this script isn't that good. So then it sort of slides to the bottom of their to-do list. They're not motivated to do this work for you because they don't anticipate that it's going to result in meetings. I guess there's a third option, which is, you know, the manager is just bad at their job, in which case fire them. It's not really relevant to this conversation. But if your manager is either not getting good results or they're not enthusiastic about your script, you can and should write something new that is going to reinvigorate their excitement. And then when you get it to them, now they're all of a sudden ready to take this new thing out on the town. And conversely, if your script is getting you a lot of meetings and you go in and meet with these executives, those executives are going to inevitably ask, what else do you have? Send me the next thing. And you want to make sure that you are able to talk about what you're writing next and whether your script gets sold and you need to follow that up with the next project, or your script gets you a bunch of meetings but doesn't actually end up getting produced. You're going to need to come up with the next project that you're going to get out there. And so starting now and consistently having that habit of continuing to work on new material is key. Now, on the flip side of that, you don't want to have too much new material because, well, one, the quality is going to be lower. And two, if you are handing your manager even more than, I would say 1 to 2 new scripts a year is perfect. If it's 3 or more scripts in a year, it's going to be too much material because it takes a long time for executives. It'll take them weeks or months to actually read something. And so if your manager sends your script out to a lot of executives, then we have to wait for them to actually read that material. If in the meantime, now you're getting 2-3 more scripts from this writer, you're going to develop a backlog and then the writer's going to get impatient. And so having that nice cadence of 1 to 2 new scripts a year is ideal. Also, when your manager gets you meetings, you want to really do a good job in those meetings, meaning when you show up on time, you have an engaging conversation. When the manager follows up with that executive and asks how it went, they have nothing but positive things to say about you. They want to stay in touch. Even better would be to turn that meeting into a job somehow. So you're talking with the executive about projects that they're looking for writers for. You take notes on some of these opportunities. You go back, you think about a potential pitch. You go to your manager and say, hey, the exec that I met with was looking for a writer to adapt this property or this comic or whatever. And I've come up with a take, meaning a pitch for how you would adapt it. Yeah. Can you set a follow-up meeting for me to come in and actually pitch on this job? So there is a skill of making someone like you in a meeting. And then there's a separate skill of turning that meeting into paid work. And if you can keep doing that, you're going to become the person that the manager wants to send out to meetings more than anyone else because it's turning into paid work. And then the third thing, don't forget this, is once you take a meeting with someone, if it goes well, if you hit it off, if you like each other, you don't need to do this if they don't like you and you don't like them. But if it goes well, you should be following up with that exec consistently. And by consistently, I mean every 6 to 12 months so that they don't forget who you are. You keep them updated with what they're doing and you start fostering a genuine relationship. So you're not only relying on your manager to follow up on your behalf and keep you on people's radars. You are using the opportunities that your manager puts you up for as a springboard into building and strengthening your own professional network. Because really, at the end of the day, even if you have a really well-connected, hardworking, intelligent, gregarious, motivated manager who is capable of putting you up for all kinds of opportunities, you probably are mostly going to get hired by people that you already know and opportunities that you generate yourself, especially when you're just getting started in terms of getting staffed or getting something into development. It's probably going to come from your own personal network. Maybe this is a network that your manager helps you build and you continue to foster and expand and build on. Or maybe you hear about an opportunity from a friend or mentor, and then you can set up that meeting, tell your manager about it. Great. You're meeting with the showrunner. Now they can call the producers, executives, network, and kind of help you totally surround this opportunity. But you're going to have to continue to do a lot of this interpersonal relationship building on your own for the rest of your career.
That makes a lot of sense. But it does, what it helps to understand, for a writer to understand, is that you've got someone managing you, but it's not like a boss employee. It's somebody who's kind of setting you on a path that you've agreed is the right path for the writer you are. And then you seeing the opportunities as they arise as much as anything else once you're in the room having an ongoing dialogue, whether that's every 6 months or whatever. That's really interesting. We should tell people then, how can they get hold of How to Query Literary Managers for your screenplay?
Oh, yes. You can just download the guide for free if you go to howtogetamanager.com. It's super easy.
Fantastic. I will put a link in the show notes. Thank you for giving that précis an overlook of the book and some other advice as well. We shall now move into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life.
Yeah, everything in my adult life. Oh my goodness. I did select these 3 films because they impacted my decision to go into this industry and career in the first place. And also looking at them, it reminded me of when I was putting together, so for the class that I'm teaching, Screenwriter Brunch Club, every week I have the writers who are participating, I give them 2 options. So they need to watch the movie and read the script for at least one of the 2 films. And I try to include a lighthearted comedy and an edgier drama. And I put together my first draft of the syllabus for this class. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, you can totally tell that I am a millennial white woman from all of my suggestions. And I had to go through and add a lot of diversity in terms of who the protagonists were and also what decade the movies came out in. And my 3 films that I chose for this podcast are very indicative of who I am and where I came from and when I was born.
But that's a common factor with all my guests.
Yeah,
you know,
I'm sure.
It's very common. That's the point. I mean, it's a grander title than it really is. It's more about, it's as much, I could have said 3 films that have got the fondest memories attached to them as well, but that didn't have as much pizzazz as impact on your life. That's so true. I went a bit grander. So then, for those people that haven't listened to this before, that are tuning in for the first time, the rules are simple. I have 3 films. I limit the conversation on each film to 5 minutes. And every time we hear this sound, you can hear that at your end, okay?
I can, yes.
Fantastic. Okay. First up, we have a live-action Disney film from 2003, a remake of a 76 classic starring Barbara Harris and Jodie Foster. Mary Rogers considers this newer version the best adaptation of a novel, calling it the first time the characters seem real despite the unreal goings-on. It is the story of Tess and her daughter Anna. They do not get along. However, a freak incident causes them to switch bodies and force them to live each other's lives. Starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan, I'm talking about Freaky Friday. Tell us, what fond memories does this film hold for you?
When this movie came out, I was actually already a fan of the franchise. So as a child, I had read the novel and watched the original film. So I was coming into this from the context of being one of those, the book is better than the movie, little nerdy kids. And I adored the movie. Because of my age, Lindsay Lohan was a big idol of mine. I loved Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen. I loved Mean Girls. And this was my introduction into how fabulous she was. It was great to see. This was my introduction to Jamie Lee Curtis as an actress. And then just seeing where she's gone since then, I feel like she's one of my moms from this film. I adored the soundtrack as a child. I listened to it near constantly. And so every single song in this movie brings me back to a simpler time. Structurally, I think it 95% holds up. The racism in the inciting incident is completely unnecessary to the film and very cringe-inducing when you look back at it in 2025 in the rewatch. Totally didn't need to be there. In the book and the original movie, the freaky incident that results in the mother and daughter switching bodies doesn't have any magical explanation. Now, as a writer, I love high concept comedies. I mean, I adore Groundhog Day, any sort of movie in which Bruce Almighty, any sort of movie in which magic causes the character to go down this comedic trajectory. And a lot of these films, but especially the original, they don't explain the magic and the audience doesn't care. It's not actually about the logic behind why any of this happened. What we're more interested in is what is going to happen now as a result. But I do really think that the mother-daughter relationship holds up. The character arcs that each of them go on in terms of learning to empathize with one another now that they're literally in each other's shoes. Fantastic. The comedy is so great. And just on a superficial level, this came out back when DVDs had bonus features. So you had to click play on the menu in order to watch the movie. And if you didn't want to click play, there were other options. And most movies at the time had a behind the scenes section. Yeah. And Freaky Friday had a behind the scenes section in which we got to see footage of the actual production. And it looked like they were having so much fun. Now, in hindsight, obviously, I know it's because they were shooting a behind the scenes segment. And so everyone knew they needed to look like they were having fun. But at the time, as a gullible child who was susceptible to propaganda, I thought that making movies looked delightful. I always knew that I wanted to be a writer, and it was the behind the scenes of many films, but I think that was one of the first ones that I really watched and was impacted by that made me think that I would enjoy it if I were to go down that path. Now, I don't actually spend a lot of time on set, if at all, and film production doesn't interest me as much as writing, but it's Freaky Friday that seduced me into the process of filmmaking as just an industry.
And did you get to see it on the big screen first time round, or was it a small screen watch?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I saw it in theaters. Absolutely. It was a transcendent experience. And because I was already a fan of the book and the original film, yeah, I knew I wanted to see it in theaters. So I made an effort to go do that.
So take us back then. So what's your theater that you go to watch it? Where are you watching it?
I grew up in Walnut Creek, California, and our local movie theater was Century Theaters in downtown Pleasant Hill. And it's a very typical suburb. You know, it's got the carpet, it's got the popcorn, it's pretty big. It's where it had a Borders across the street, RIP, if anyone remembers that bookstore. They no longer exist.
There's our first 5 minutes, Audrey. How was that?
That was great. I enjoyed it. Takes me back. Now I want to listen to the Freaky Friday soundtrack again, and I will probably do that after this meeting is over.
Interestingly, I was reading that most of the songs on the soundtrack are covers, in the sense, and that was a nod to the fact it was a remake, apparently, as a decision.
I didn't know that, but that absolutely makes sense.
For your second choice, again, we're going back to 2003, but a very different tone. The main character's yellow outfit was inspired by an outfit worn by Bruce Lee in his final film, Game of Death, in 1978. Approximately $60,000 of the movie's budget was used on swords and sword accessories, and the finale took 8 weeks to shoot. According to The Star, the director had her watch 4 movies in preparation: John Woo's The Killer, Kofi, starring Jackie Brown star Pam Grier, and Sergio Leone's A Fistful of Dollars. It's the story of a former assassin who wakes up from a 4-year coma to take revenge on her team of assassins who betrayed her. Directed by Tarantino and co-written with Uma Thurman. I'm talking about Kill Bill. Do you want to tell us where Kill Bill fits in then? Given it's the same year as Freaky Friday, but a very different movie.
Yes, and I did not see this one in theaters because it was too violent for me, a child. I was absolutely not allowed to go see this movie. So I didn't end up watching it until later when I was in high school.
Okay.
I do, though, remember as a kid going down to the local video store. That was a thing we had back then, which makes me feel very old to describe. But remembering family movie night being sitting down in the living room, we all had to decide what, 2 or 3 potential options for a movie that we wanted to watch. And then my dad and I would drive to the store. We didn't have cell phones. So if we wanted to change our minds, we just had to come up with a better idea without consulting the rest of the family. And so then you go, and the mind reels when I think about Netflix in comparison now. When you go to the video store, you have the video that you want to watch, but if someone else has it, then you're out of luck. You have to have one of the other options. It was a different time. And there was a big poster of Kill Bill in the store. And because I was a little kid, I didn't know what the movie was about, but it sounded violent. It sounded dangerous. I always remember looking at it and just wondering what the situation with that was. And it wasn't even my first Tarantino movie. My first Tarantino movie was in high school when Inglourious Basterds came out.
Okay.
I believe I was on a quest to watch all of the Best Picture nominees that year. I was more serious about doing that in high school. And Inglourious Basterds was one. And that was the first experience I had where I finished watching a movie and then I decided I need to see everything that this director has done. And then went back into the catalog. And I think I tried to go in chronological order, but I did Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill. Kill Bill, the first time I watched it, so it was on DVD at home in the living room. But I watched the first movie because it's part 1 and 2. And people always ask me, oh, which of the movies do you like better, part 1 or part 2? But I reject the premise of that question because it's actually one movie split up into 2 parts because it's too long. So you can't ask someone what part of the movie did you enjoy, the beginning or the end. It's one cohesive experience. So I watched part 1 on one day and then had about, a 24-hour period and watched part 2 the next day. And if you haven't seen Kill Bill before, that's how I recommend watching it. Because doing it back to back is kind of a lot all at once. You need time to digest the first film, but not too much time because you don't want to forget about it. So I watched part 1. I watched part 2 the next day. Absolutely adored the beginning, middle, and end of everything about this movie. I personally liked Elle Driver more than the bride. I thought she was badass with her eye patch. Their whole scene I found to be the most engaging part of the movie for me. I loved it from beginning to end. So to the point that when I went on to film school, and this would have been 3 or 4 years later, as my film school senior thesis for one of my film analysis classes, I wrote my senior thesis on Kill Bill and how it's a movie about movies. And because Tarantino loves cinema so much, and so much of what he does is an homage to different types of movies that he adores, And I think I found a kernel of the inspiration for this from some other paper that I cited in this macro paper that I did. But in my paper, I went through each of the assassins in the movie. And essentially, every single person that the bride kills is representative of a different genre of cinema and then embodies the tropes of that genre, so that you go through and the entire process is a movie about the different ways that stories can be told.
Finish your thought.
Oh, the different ways that stories can be told cinematically. And the thing that I thought was the most interesting was, stereotypically in especially horror movies, the black person dies first and is the first victim. I think that's been subverted more recently, but this came out in 2003. And so that's one of the reasons chronologically you've got Vernita Green at the beginning. And so it was a really interesting rabbit hole to go down for me.
Right then, we're on your final choice. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Cool. Right then. On the first day of filming of this 2006 smash hit, Meryl Streep told Anne Hathaway, "I think you're perfect for the role. I'm so happy we're going to work together." Then she paused and said, "That's the last nice thing I'll say to you." And it was. Despite multiple fashion designer loans, Patricia Field still spent more than $1 million on costuming, making it the most expensively costumed film in history. And then all the costumes were sold off at auction for research into breast cancer, which is a kind of nice payoff to that big expense. Anne Hathaway bought the green dress her character gets to wear. And Meryl Streep kept her sunglasses, which she used in Mamma Mia for the money scene 2 years later. It is the story of a smart but sensible graduate who travels to New York and becomes the assistant to the city's biggest, meanest, cynical fashion magazine editor. Adapted from Lauren Weisberger's 2003 novel by Crazy Ex-Girlfriend showrunner Aline Brash McKenna. I'm talking about Devil Wears Prada. Tell us more. Where does this fit in your film watching life?
This one I did see in theaters when it came out, and I remember being blown away by the experience. I wanted to live the same glamorous life that Andy Sachs lived. I don't know why, because the whole message of the film was that her job sucked and it made her miserable. Yeah. And I went, I want to do that. And then I did, and I worked as an assistant for years. And you know what? It did suck, and it was miserable. And there were a lot of moments in my career that were emotionally similar to moments in The Devil Wears Prada. I guess on a certain level, I thought that I would do it differently and better and more successfully, because I knew that I would have never walked away from that career at the, sorry, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie the way she does. But in hindsight, my experience was much less glamorous, much less fashionable. I thought I was going to be able to wear cooler outfits when I was working as an assistant, and Hollywood was not the same when it came to that aesthetic. But I did find a lot of comfort in rewatches over the years. Less so from Andy Sachs and more so from Emily Blunt's character, where as an assistant, I was like, oh my God, I have become her. This is the person that I am now. And, I've got a lot of things to say about the labor conditions that assistants in this industry have to go through. And on one hand, I don't love in hindsight the way it's glamorized. But on the other hand, it kind of was nice to have this film vehicle through which I could feel like the themes of, how do we lose ourselves when we're striving for something? Yeah. And I think it's really key that, at the beginning of the movie, Anne Hathaway's character, she doesn't want to work in fashion. She wants to be a writer.
Yeah, she wants to be a journalist, doesn't she?
She wants to be, a journalist, a real writer doing pieces that matter. And she sort of feels like she has to grind through this job because of what's on the other side. And, I didn't get too into the beginnings of my career in this conversation, but I started in reality TV, which wasn't very glamorous or fashionable, but it did feel like something I had to grind through in order to come out on the other side, doing the types of jobs that I actually wanted in terms of working with writers, working with scripted television. And then just on a more superficial level, I really enjoy that opening montage, the music in terms of the KT Tunstall song. I would, when I was a little kid, play it while getting ready so that I could imagine I was being a glamorous person getting ready to go to work. And I did think that that's what my life would be like when I grew up. It's not, but it was nice to think that at the time.
It was. I was reading that the production designer snuck into Vogue's offices to look at Anna Wintour's office, and so
Wow.
they replicated it as best they could, so authentically that Anna redecorated her office immediately after the film was released.
That is such a fun fact. I had no idea. And I think, too, because I was pretty young when this came out, this was my first time ever seeing Meryl Streep in anything. So she, and many actors are like this, not just her, but she's only ever been Miranda Priestley, but sometimes she does different roles. Like, to me, she's Miranda Priestley before she's Meryl Streep.
Well, it's in some ways it's it's a shorter part of the story, but in Kill Bill, you've got the similar thing with the bride, and in the backstory, the way she's taught to do the kung fu and the karate is that similar kind of abusive mentor relationship, which is, I'm doing this for your own good, as opposed to this is just mean.
Yeah. And when I was younger, I did a lot of sports. I played soccer, lacrosse. I still bring an athlete mindset to a lot of what I do, especially writing, building my business, all of that. And I think it both allowed me to enjoy that type of storytelling, and also in terms of setting up this cycle, informed my work ethic, where I'm pretty willing to put up with a lot of shit if I think I'm going to learn and grow from the experience.
Yeah, no, sport is where that happens. I mean, I'm a big soccer fan myself, and in that you talk about the manager giving the players the hairdryer treatment at half time, as if that's a good thing, shout the heads off before they go out again. But it's considered normal part of it. And I think when you transpose that to an office environment, then suddenly it looks like being mean, because you're not exerting energy or anything in the same way. Well, look, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Thank you very much for sharing that insight into your guidebook, How to Query Literary Managers for Your Screenplay. And it just gives me to say thank you very much for giving your time on the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been so fun.
Hey there, Hugh from Podderation here. If you like today's show, then we think you will love Punch and Roll for Initiative, the other D&D show by a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors. Join a brand new show from the ground up with a cast full of professional voice talent as they make their own adventures in a custom-made fantasy world. If you want to hear more, check out our website at podderation.com.